I'm going to take a moment to introduce our guest or panelist for today, Minister Ronnie Vanderhorst. All coalition members, is the co-founder of Prepare Our Youth Incorporated and the president and owner of Seed Planter International LLC. And yours truly, Dr. Nosakhere Thomas, Senior Apostle, Rainbow Community Praise Center, and your host and moderator for today. And we want to bring each of our panelists in today so that we can have this important conversation. And I'd like Mr. Vanderhorst, if you would help pick us up there on the idea of privilege as it relates to this. So we've got, this, we've got Kanye West. He got a little, he got a little change. He got a little juice. He don't wear a chain though on the outside. But we got Kyrie Irving, who's very notable and but yet indisposable, disposable, I should say. And so the notion of privilege and how we understand it and see it in this context. What are your thoughts?
Well, Dr. Gerald Anderson just brought up in a comment as it pertained to the indigenous people, and the white privilege that caused the Trail of Tears and all of the whole process of the displacement and the genocide and so forth of indigenous people in this particular country. And that's because of white privilege. But in addition to that, the whole aspect of privilege is just a mass bogarting of resources, not just simply in this country, but globally. The privilege of the Middle East and this Eurocentric construct of resources, oil, gold. I mean, this whole privilege construct just goes throughout this particular world, and it's undeniable. And then to call the first world the third world, you really have taken your privilege to even do that kind of thing there. And so I believe that this ties into some of the pushback also, some of the boldness also, some of the critiques also. As my mother told me when I was a young boy, no individual or institution is beyond critique, you see. And so as we look at this privilege and we look at those who have been disenfranchised and so forth, the tension is always there. The rub is going to always be there. And that's why it is quintessential that we as Black people have to do some things. We have to decolonize our minds. We have to deconstruct what's going on in the I effect, as I call it, the interruption effect, my Black social praxis, which deals with indoctrination. We have to deconstruct all that we've been indoctrinated about, which leads then to internalization, that's which we have internalized, and then finally institutionalization that keeps us locked mentally and physically in affiliations and in constructs that are deleterious to our own health and well-being. So we have to really look at all of this stuff. But I found that many times we got so many of our people who don't want to decolonize and deconstruct. They just want to be successful in whiteness, even though it has been weaponized against us like anti-Semitism. That is a weaponized construct. But if you can be successful in whiteness, then you good. While the rest of us suffer. But then I always get back to my two things, my basis, and I'll be done with this. The two things that I'm functioning off that I'm going to go out on with both guns blazing. Number one is, how does it free us? That's what Professor Sonia Sanchez said. How does it free us? How does your affiliation free you? How does your mindset free you? How does your friend group free you? And then the second thing I got from Dr. Jerome Crichton, what do we say to our children? That's what we got to deal with too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, Khari, he shouldn't have. What? Khari's the fault? Really? What do we say to our children, our progeny, going forward with this? Or do we keep them indoctrinated and internalized and institutionalized in these so-called privileged constructs, hoping to get a little privilege, maybe some crumbs that drop from the table? I ain't with that.
Thank you so much. We never have a problem knowing what you're thinking because you're going to put it out there. Appreciate it. Look what Pastor Claudia Allen says. She says, I work for the EOC office. Majority of the cases filed are from Jews based on anti-Semitism, even though the highest basis of ethnic discrimination is anti-Black discrimination. That's what you're saying right there, right there. She goes on to say, thank you so much for your contributions to the panel, Pastor Allen. Simply, they filed the ethnic and religious protections more than any other group. We need Black, Asian, and Latino groups to formally file way more often. Well, that's true, but we need the system fixed, right? so nobody don't have to file, right? And we're dealing with the systemic issues of racism and white supremacy at their core. All right, we're going to go on to you, Dr. Hemmings, and talk a little bit more about this privilege as you've seen it and discerned it, even in this conversation.
Well, maybe I should sort of put a corrector on my last statement about vulnerable groups, not just Jews and Blacks, but as Claudia just brought up there, Asians, Latino. These are
Native Americans.
Nobody said Native Americans. These are all vulnerable groups, and so for one of those vulnerable groups to seem to have the loudest voice when it comes to crying out wolf, it seems a little bit over the top. Not that they shouldn't cry out. Of course they should cry out by all means. But who is hearing the others who are crying out? And even those who cry out must listen to the others. And that is what I insist. I insist that my Jewish brothers and sisters be compassionate. I'm not saying they're not, but they must be specifically compassionate to those other groups that are vulnerable. That is what I'm calling on them to do and to be, because they have more power than the rest of us. And that's what I'm calling upon. Yeah, and let me say, I have many Jewish friends that I love, really love, close to, and I hear their stories. I listen to many of their stories, and the stories bring tears to my eyes. But and they have listened to my story. But in general, as a society, as a privileged group, I want to hear them coming into a conversation where they say, let us listen to the stories of all the vulnerable groups of this society. And let us begin a movement to protect, to make America sensitive, to make America understand that all of us deserve the kind of, what did I say? Freedom, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. All of us in American society. And those of us who are powerful, let us help those who don't have the power to do it. That's what fundamentally what I want to call for this evening.
Excellent, excellent, very good.
I'm calling for sovereignty.
All right. Got a personal advertising going.
I'm calling for sovereignty.
Hey, it's not personal advertising; it's for the people, though, right?
No, I'm telling you. Listen. That's the next step in our liberation.
Yeah.
Institution building, and sovereignty. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Well, so Shaquille O'Neal said that Kyrie Irving was an idiot, right? And he since tried to walk it back a bit, but he said that because he said, you're an idiot, because don't you know that they have the power to take food off your tape? That's what he was saying. He wasn't saying, he had no evaluation for his rightness or wrongness, correctness, or anything else. He was simply saying you were an idiot for jeopardizing your family. Shaquille O'Neal, Barkley, and the others were talking about power. That's what they were talking about. And on these social media platforms, how can you say that if you want to eat, right? That's what they were saying. You want to take care of your family. So help us unpack this a little bit more, Dr. Crichton. So here's a guy, Kyrie Irving, that literally put a link on his page. And then, as Dave Chappelle said, Kyrie got in trouble for Kanye, right? Right. And so out of that, 6 points or 6 amends that he had to make. One, I wish I could put them up. Apologize and condemn the anti-Semitic film, no matter what you believe. We talking about power. 2, a $500,000 donation to anti-hate causes.
To who? Guess who?
A
Yeah.
$500,000 donation to anti-hate causes. 3, sensitivity training, right? 4, training to address anti-Semitism, right? 5, meet with ADL and Jewish leaders. I'm talking about power. And 6, meet with the team owner, Joe Tsai. All right. So talk to us a little bit about how we understand the nature and the notion of power in this particular context, Dr. Crichton.
Yeah. In psychology, there's a concept called habituation. And the concept of habituation says very simply, if you go to a hotel and you check in, you'll sleep better the second night than you did the first night because you've become more habituated. That's a basic concept, right? But perhaps a more hopefully profound way of expressing this is like a relationship between 2 individuals where one spouse in the relationship is abusive, and the one who's being abused gets used to it. And so they lose perspective on what the norm is or what is acceptable. This is really the best way, I think, to understand the remarks by Shaquille O'Neal and by Charles Barkley and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Shannon Sharpe and others, right? Melissa Harris Perry, in her book Sister Citizen, provides an example which she draws from a psychological experiment where people were blindfolded and put in a crooked room. The room is actually tilted. And over a period of time, they became adjusted to the slope in the floor. It became natural or normal. Well, the thing that I think we all need to understand, without getting into the personalities and why some people prefer to go for the, as Malcolm said, some people prefer comfort, security rather than freedom, right? Without going into that in terms of the personalities, the real issue here is that it's important for us to get people to understand how demented the social structure that we live in is, how warped and twisted it is. Because some people find they don't have any drive or any desire to straighten out this crooked room. They're fine living with a slanted floor. They're fine living in an abusive relationship. Now, as for me and my house, I don't care whether it is an institution like the church. I will not name any particular denomination here. I don't care whether it is the work environment. Look, if something is crooked, we need to deal with the fact that it's crooked and not just habituate to it and perpetuate the problems, because that is really what it comes down to. So these pundits who are sitting on the sideline, they're concerned because they've grown used to the comforts of the crooked room. and how dare you say something that might get all of us in trouble. So they don't go from talking to they don't go to just Khari to talk about a link he posted. They go across the other side of the country, and now they want to hear what LeBron's got to say about it. But this is how they do. Why? Because this is the mentality that was sown in the Enlightenment and the post-Enlightenment and exists today. This is why, we heard the New Jersey Nets CEO being referred to as Khari's owner. Khari's owner. Man, I work for you. You don't own me, right? But this is the mentality, and it's not limited by race. It's not limited by religion. Rabbi Burton alluded to that earlier. Just respect to my Ashkenaz brother.
That's right.
So this is the problem. It's a human phenomenon, and there are some people, by virtue of personality, disposition, genes, whatever. Hey, it's fine. I can live with it. It's a crooked room. We good. Get my money. I'm out. But there are others of us, man, we can't live with it. We can't live with it. We've got to be like John Coltrane and Zora Neale Hurston and Toni Morrison and John Coltrane. We've got to speak truth to power through the gifts that we have, because we can't take the crooked room, and we're not going to take it. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be a conference president or a general conference president. Man, if the room is crooked, it's crooked.
Yeah.
Straighten us out, Prophet.
And that's what the issue is, a lack of recognition. People are habituated to a warped, twisted system. And when you start speaking out about these things, they want you to shut up because it may affect their money or their comfort.
Thank you. Prophet Crichton. Now we'll hear from Rabbi Burton.
Now, Rabbi Burton needs to say something. Yes, I do have a little bit of Ashkenazi genes in me, but actually, the majority of my genes are Nigerian, and most of those are Igbo. That's another conversation.
All right.
That's another conversation, because we know the Igbo understanding of where they come from.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, so I'm celebrating my Igbo Hebrewism, but as it relates to this whole question about power, though, and the power and privilege. So again, just merge these two, this whole concept of power and privilege. I think because we have or some have the power to make us think that we're walking straight in a crooked room, we fail to question certain assumptions and assertions. And so, for instance, when we heard the response from Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley and others, and how could he circulate this anti-Semitic, did they even watch the documentary?
Right.
Now, I took the time to watch it. It's almost a 4-hour documentary, and it literally took me about 16 hours or more to go through, because I was doing a lot of fact checking. All right. And the truth is, I mean, if I was to do like a deep analysis, a lot of things, there are a lot of stretches, a lot of assertions made, etc. A lot of the sort of the new linguistic, with the neuro-linguistic programming method, it's obvious that, and I'm looking, I'm like, wait a minute, that's not that obvious, and there's a lot of cherry picking and stuff like that. I understand that. But of course, when it comes to the basic thrust of the argument as it relates to the way in which our history has been whitewashed and possibly history has been stolen, and the Bible has been, reconfigured to a European setting, that's can be historically verified, right? But because people didn't take the time to look at the documentary and see, there are a couple parts where Hitler is mentioned, but how is he used in there? He's not used to say, hey, we need to kill Jewish people, etc. He's used in a way which I think was sloppy. But I would really like to talk to somebody who thinks that the way in which that comment was used was anti-Semitic. Now, if one considers anything that mentions Adolf Hitler as being anti-Semitic, then okay, yes, I can understand that. But if you take the time to take a look at what was said, as I did, because again, I have no desire to ostracize any group of people. Some family members of mine who are more than 50% Ashkenazi, all right? I have no desire to do that. But I do think there needs to be a commitment to truth, right? Now, I also believe, again, when it comes to perception, and I should have said this in the initial response to this whole thing of perception. When it comes to perception, if you don't understand, for instance, I'm going to Ye now. We're moving from Khari to Ye, right? If you don't understand the teaching of the Hebrew Israelites, you're not going to understand what Ye was saying, all right? Or even give levels of interpretation of what he may have meant. So when Ye says he can say anti-Semitic stuff and Adidas won't fire him, he may not have been talking about Ashkenazis. Because in his mind, if black people are the real Semites, he could talk a whole bunch of stuff against black people and nothing's going to happen. Now, I'm not saying that's how he was reasoning, but it's possible based upon him believing that blacks are the true Semites, that's what he may have been saying. I'm not saying that's what he was saying, and I'm definitely not a Ye apologist at all right? But there are different ways in which you can hear it being said. So even the line in the movie, and whether this was the producer of the movie, that this was his view, but there was one line that at least it was 6 things it says that Jews want us to believe. And one of them has to do with 6 million Jews being killed in the Holocaust. Now, if that's what he meant, and he was basically going on that trope that there were not that many who got killed, then yes, that would definitely be quote unquote anti-Semitic if we're going to take that understanding of anti-Semitic. But if you look at it as him saying, well, these are the folk from the Khazar line, and they're not authentic Semites anyhow, it's not denying that 6 million people were killed on the basis of what they were professing, but he's basically questioning their ethnicity. All right. Now, do I agree with that? No. But if a person stands back and listens to the reason behind why a person comes to a certain conclusion, then they can say, okay, I don't agree with that. That's what people do, especially when it comes to religion, because, well, I don't agree with that, but I can understand why you're saying that, even though I don't agree with it, I don't even like it, but I can understand. And when we don't take the time to really listen and understand where the other person is coming from, people with power can tell us what they said, even though that's what they said. And if anyone has looked at Khari, they tried to trip him up after his first game and try to get him to say something to distance himself from folk he didn't even know was outside, etc. And his basic thing was, listen, you guys accuse me of something that is not true about me. You don't know me. You really don't want to get to know me. You want to label me. And that's the danger of this power that comes with people who can form a perception and get others to believe that we are someone who we really are not. And I think that's the problem that needs to be elevated. That's what Chappelle took to the table. And I'm hoping that our response to the Chappelle effect is one that will invite our Jewish brothers and sisters around the table so that we can have conversations like this, get to a point of understanding, expanding their minds and their thinking so that they can understand too that white supremacy has been manifesting the practice of European Jews calling the shots about what goes and what's off limits.
Excellent. And so many powerful points, both from the conversation going on online on YouTube and also what you were saying, Dr. Burton. And as we think about this power, I want to show this powerful clip as we think about power on the inside, power on the outside. And I just want us to look at this for a moment.
Make sure it doesn't take us off.
He said, I'm standing.
And I will stand fast on it. You was big and bad.
Can you all hear it?
Because he said, I have an army.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you go?
And I'll just stop that right there. But I wanted us to see that because Shannon Sharp in this interview, in this conversation, said, you said you got an army. Khari said he had an army. Where's the army at? Right? But this is, I can't tell, but it certainly seems more than 150. They look like they're about 6 across, 4, 5, 6 across. But it's more than 100 people. It's more than 150 people. And we know that they got issues with numbering our folks, particularly when we go to things like the Million Man March and other things, the inauguration of Barack Obama and other things. But we talk about power. For me, one of the most powerful scenes I've ever seen in cinematography is in the Malcolm X movie by Spike Lee, when outside, after blacks had been arrested, Malcolm went inside and they looked outside the window and there were hundreds of Black Muslims standing outside. And so that says something about Black people's power. And as we talk about power and then moving into personal responsibility with the time that we have left, we may just go a little bit over if you all indulge us a bit. I want us to talk about this power continuum and also personal responsibility. So, and also we want to engage, we have brothers and sisters from the, at least brothers from the Hebrew Israelite community who are on the thread and who are talking. And we want to say something about that and about their contribution and what that means for this group of individuals to come together and stand up. That's power. That's power shifting, that's power demonstration, that's organizing, right? And so talk a little bit about that for us, if you would, Minister Van der Horst.
Frederick Douglass says power does not concede without demand. That's standard right there. And it's quintessential. But the power does not come individually. The power comes in institution building. The power comes when we come together. And I like what Dr. Malana Karinga said, the founder of Kwanzaa, which these should be our daily principles. It shouldn't just be something we bring up in Nguzo Saba once a year, but they should be our daily principles of unity and self-determination and collective work and responsibility and cooperative economics and purpose and faith and so forth. But he said this. He said, we as an African Black people may never have an ideological unity. And Dr. Crichton referred to it that we are not a monolithic people. He said, Dr. Karinga, we may never have an ideological unity, but what we must have is an operational unity. And that's what's quintessential. That's what's necessary. That's what's possible. And it can be started in our friend groups. It can be started in our families, in our friend groups, in our social networks, and then ripple out. So it is possible. However, there has to be a will to do that. And I know that it can be done. My family is doing some things, and it is rippling out. Many of you may be doing some things and rippling out. I'm just simply saying that power is a collective thing. And we don't have to wait on some traditional institutions for them to do something. You know, once I understood the nature of institutions, I was clear. Institutions protect themselves against the collective. Eurocentric institutions. So we're not waiting on them for anything. It begins and continues with us. Start in our families, our friend groups, our social networks, and ripple out. Whether it is for wealth building, whether it is for going into the village to assist our children and youth, whatever it might be, we can and we must do something. 2023 must be institution building for us as a people.
All right. Outstanding. Outstanding. All right.
What in your affiliations?
All right. Very good. So, Dr. Hemmings, we were talking about power and then personal responsibility. Okay, so I see what's going on. I see the dynamic. And so what is it that I should be doing as an individual, as a Christian, as a human being in society, as I look and reflect upon what's going on in our society relative to this particular question and how these human activities are being played out?
Well, as somebody involved in education, I think and then we've been on this team, it is very important for us to focus on educating ourselves. We need to be in the know because many mistakes, many blunders are made as a result of ignorance. Ignorance of who we are, ignorance of who the other person is. But let me say this. I've been thinking about it as we're moving along in this conversation. And it borders on perception too, perception, power, responsibility. The story of the Holocaust is so well known by many. Some Black people know that story better than they know the story of the transatlantic slave trade. And I think that that story needs to be told more. Our children need to learn it more. Those of us who are responsible need to focus on it more because it is not well known. I have a lot of compassion for the Jewish story because it's been told to me over and over and over. I also happen, because I grew up in the West Indies, I also know about the transatlantic slave trade very well, and therefore I'm also very conscious of my own story. But not many people are. I remember a certain student who in a particular class at a particular university that I will not name, that she was so angry because she was told to go to the Holocaust Museum and do all sorts of stuff and research. And she says, this class is filled mainly with Black people. Why aren't we told to go and do research on the transatlantic slave trade? So it tells you something, that we have the responsibility to tell our story. We're not telling our story as much as Jews, for example, are telling their stories. We need to hear that story. And as individuals, wherever it's important for us to tell these stories, so that that kind of compassion will also come to us from our Jewish brothers and sisters, and of course, other groups in American society. That to me is very important. We can't just be saying, oh, we're Black people, we suffer Jim Crow, whatever. Let us systematically tell the story, just as well as the Jews have systematically and repeatedly told us their story.